Now, you guys saw the video that I showed with AOC mocking the ideology which she calls woke 1.0. Apparently, all the Democrats are now laughing at it, despite the fact that no one wants to articulate what part of woke 1.0 do they disagree with. Because if they were to articulate that, then they would have a lot of ass-hurt voters. But still, again, AOC has decreed that woke 1.0 is over. And since she said that, you get to see a lot of people on the internet coming up after 10 years of activism and trying to define what woke 1.0 was. And so you have this individual, Mayo Olivera, saying that as someone who was deployed to the woke 1.0 wars in 2014, I take full responsibility for what it ended up looking like a decade later. It's not my job to educate you was actually the most insane, detrimental, and endlessly parroted line of that early woke era. So they're not really having a problem with the ideology, right? Like, they're not having a problem with the ideology talking about how white people have privilege and how white people need to suffer and how marginalized people need to be in the center, and the people in the center now have to be marginalized in the way of equality and racial justice, right? That's not an issue that they're having a problem with. What they're having a problem with is the tactic. It's not my job to educate you. The thing is, like, this was a very effective tactic. Like, that's the reality. Why did it happen? Well, it happened because before Obama, like before 2014, America went through a very weird government political theocracy, if you will. Not really a theocracy, but the Bush era was extremely religious. At least that's how I viewed it at the time from outside of America. Because I remember seeing politicians on a stage talking about how the war in Iraq was a war from God, that it was, a holy mission. And you get to see people online that were atheists, and they had like religious parents, and the parents would constantly freak out over the music they listened, over the video games they listened, because they were ungodly. Pokemon was from the devil. So you have like that type of culture that my generation grew up in. Now, again, I grew up in Romania, but I did have friends from my age that were from the United States, and they felt that ideology to be suffocating. Like, they literally, that's what they said, like, I feel suffocated in the house with my parents. And a lot of them ended up becoming woke. Now, how did they become woke? Well, they did a moral decoupling. A moral decoupling means, like, literally, I don't give a fuck what you say, right? Like, you cannot control me anymore. I just disassociate myself from you completely. And many of them genuinely did that, right? Like, they disassociated themselves completely from their family, from their friends. Like, it was a very black and white worldview. It's like, if you're with the Bush, if you're with the old era, I don't care what you say. I just don't want anything to do with you. And so they congregated on places like Tumblr, on places like NeoGAF, on places like Twitter. And they started sharing block lists, and they started excluding everyone else from the conversation. And so it's not my job to educate you was basically saying, like, you're not part of the moral group we're trying to create. We don't want to hang out with you. But it was also said in a way so that average people would see that the woke person claims to be educated, right? Like, they're enlightened. Most of them theoretically were by the institutions because they went to the academia, right? But just because you have a paper degree doesn't necessarily mean that you're smart. But still, like, no, this was genuinely a way that woke 1.0 worked. And it's because they weren't actually trying to persuade people. Like, they created harassment groups, and they ended up going after anyone that they viewed to be another. And so corporations not wanting the harassment groups to come after their employees, to come after their brand, would start putting woke people, right, in positions of power. But more importantly, the woke 1.0s, like, they weren't trying to persuade the normies. The woke 1.0 were actually trying to persuade the people in power. So they were trying to persuade the politicians, the CEOs, the bankers. The problem is literally that this tactic is very effective on the short term, right? Because this is why you get the backlash, because the normies were never convinced. Like, sure, the doctors and the academics and the CEOs were convinced that a man can become a woman. The normies not so much. And so much to the horror and dismay of the elites, they didn't understand why people started boycotting Bud Light. And so, my old Vera, which, again, they did activists for 10 years, and despite the fact that they own Twitter, that their side owns social media, Facebook, YouTube, Google search engine, like literally everything, right? Commercials, movies, TV shows, cartoons. Despite the fact that they own the entire culture, they still failed. And again, like, this is my assessment on why they failed. They failed because they never actually bothered to have a conversation with the normies. They just managed to get the avenues of power. So they say very many replies later, activism in 2014, have not done one sole or perhaps even prime focus. I first got involved with immigrant rights and reproductive justice as an immigrant woman in Texas. Things I believe were my place to educate people on. Yeah, you gotta understand the language of the woke as well. When they say educate, they don't actually mean that they want to have a conversation and see if the person gets it. It's like to force the belief on the person. That's what education means for them, right? Like, it's not a Socratic method of education. It's not a scientific method where you have to repeat the experiment and come to the same conclusion. No, it's like indoctrination, right? So what she is saying is like, I believe it was my place to indoctrinate people. And here you have John Markley, displays an incredible level of entitlement. You not only expect obedience, you expect people to care more about convincing themselves that they should obey your demands than you can be bothered to do it yourself, right? So now all of the woke 1.0 warriors are seeming to be getting backlash from their side because, yes, they are a little bit demoralized. To be fair, like having an ideology that actually manages to get global, and you have all the corporations, and you have embassies, and you have like literally every single institution that projects power to promote your ideology, and then all of a sudden, overnight, all of that collapses. Yes, like they are probably shocked, right? And the reason why it's happening is, well, this is pretty much the future of every single revolution that is radical, but more importantly, can only exist if it uses constant cancel culture, if it uses constant enforcement, and more importantly, if it doesn't try to genuinely convince people, right? And instead it just forces it on other people. If you require a thumb to sit on the spring in order to keep the spring down, when you remove the thumb, the spring goes up. And this is what happened with wokeness. Let me know what you guys think, though, and as usual, we'll see each other in the comment section. Take care.